Hello.
Hey, happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
I'm wearing my Hedy Lamarr shirt.
What's Hey Lamar?
What's that?
What's Hey Lamar?
Hedy Lamarr, she is an actress and model that also invented some of the technology that was kind of like the precursor to things like Wi-Fi.
Ooh, that's cool.
So she invented this means of like modulating the signal between the radio signal between a ship and a guided torpedo. So like it couldn't be jammed or whatever, but that's my understanding.
Ben.
What?
Ben
So, all right. What are we talking about today, Tracy?
Ben needs a haircut.
I do. I need a haircut really bad. I've been working too much, and so my hair is just very. Put a hat on it.
I'm teasing. Actually, I'm not teasing. You do need a haircut.
I do. You can see it. It's probably growing up behind my hat there.
Elliot needs a haircut too. Men.
Does he need a beard cut? Does he look like ZZ Top?
No, he's okay now. It got a little bit intense for a while, but he's okay now. I can actually kiss him now. I'm like, dude, if I can't kiss you because of your beard, we have a serious problem. So he was like, I'm fine with that for a few weeks. I'm like, but you
no good.
That off, right, Ben? You'd shave that off. Anyways, all right, let's talk about proper operators.
Proper operators.
Proper. Wait, which one are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the buffers.
The buffers, all the buffers. We can talk about buffers. Buffers are interesting. All right, let me.
Well, we're going to talk about bufferCount, bufferTime, bufferToggle, bufferWhen. Buffer.
You know what's funny is I don't always remember what bufferWhen does, but which is hilarious because we have so many operators. I inherited these operators though, so I'm not.
When do you buffer? What are we going to talk about? Prototypal inheritance. Since you inherit.
No, that's too low level. We'll save that for somebody else's thing. Let me share my screen.
That's Jay's favorite. Talking about. I remember he spent like a few hours talking to me about prototypal inheritance. I was like, but Jay, I don't want to know this. It's okay.
Sharing the wrong thing. I didn't want to share my whole screen. I want to share just an application window.
Are you gonna baby shark me? Oh my god, Elliot hates that song. He hates it so much. Yeah, he's like, stop it. I have a song stuck in my head. What is that song? I was like, oh my god.
I thought he was having flashbacks at the time he was chased by a shark.
No, and then he's like, oh, did Ben tell you about that song? Because it sounds like something that Ben would sing to his kids. I was like, no, are you on the internet? He's like, no, I'm not on the internet. I'm like, oh my god, are you on Reddit? Come on, baby shark, baby shark.
Are you on the internet?
Do you even?
Righty. So we're talking about buffer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing to do for this is probably use an interval. And we'll have our source be just an interval of things every half a second. I want to clear the console every time. Create what? Clear. All right. So we have this interval coming in here, and if there's different buffer operators, and what buffer operators do is they kind of collect values in an array and then occasionally emit the array. So the one that's easiest to kind of wrap your head around would be like bufferCount, which is, oh, wrong side. Here. And what bufferCount does is it allows you to buffer up an array of a certain size. So if I say bufferCount 3, what'll happen is this will go for a while, and then it'll get 3 values and spit it out, and then 3 values and spit it out, so on and so forth. This is the most common way that people use it. They just say, I want to get collections of 3 things. What is different is you can do things like you could say bufferCount. You want the buffer size to be, let's say 2, but you want to start the buffer every 1 element. So this is previous and current, previous and current, previous and current, previous and current, right? Like, so this is like one trick. So if you want to get the previous and current value, you could do this. There's actually another one called pairwise that does something similar.
Wait, what the hell is pairwise? That's an operator?
Yeah. So people don't really realize this.
I've never heard of this operator.
So yeah, it's the same thing. You see, you get the previous and current, previous and current, previous and current, previous and current. Pairwise and bufferCount 2.1 are basically the same thing.
So why do you have both of them? Why didn't you, like, does bufferCount wrap buffer?
Historical reasons. I mean, that's pretty much it.
Internet.
Yeah. So trying not to break people. Inevitably, I would like to see things like pairwise go away, because bufferCount 2.1 is the same thing. So anyways, that's pairwise, and here's bufferCount. And again, like, you could do things like, you could say, okay, I want a buffer of 10 things, but I want to start at every one item. And you'd have to wait for 10 things to build up, and then you'd get one. But now all of a sudden, every single tick, we're getting kind of the next buffer. So it's just building up different arrays, right? The only word of caution I would give people about this is, because these are array instances, if I'm in here and I do something like I'm mapping, and I do something to mutate the array, like I can go in here. I mean, you're still the same array instance. Like, we're not doing anything fancy there. Oh, it's complaining because it's there. Has angle what? There. Like, I'm mutating the array every single time. So that's just something for people to be aware of whenever we're dealing with these operators that emit arrays. Like, Rx is not doing anything inside of map to, like, clone an array for you to make sure that you're not mutating something that already exists. But it's kind of a side note. So that's bufferCount. And again, bufferCount 2.1 is really interesting for if you want to get, like, and I'll just add a comment up here.
Oh my God, are you ever going to let me talk?
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Happy International Women's Day, Tracy. I'm going to talk the whole time.
Real world use cases. Like, like, when are you going to use buffer versus bufferCount? Or, like, you know, the other ones. Like, are there any gotchas, or, like, when would you actually use this, or when do you not use it?
There's a few cases, like, let's just say that you've got a stream of values coming in, like maybe you want to get, like, the average of like a bunch of points coming in from mouse movements or something, or you want to get the average of, like, some really fast stream coming in. If that's the case, then you don't want to calculate that every single tick, because you're going to be doing an expensive calculation on every single tick. So what you want to do is you'd want to buffer them all and then do the calculation, and then buffer them all and then do the calculation. So you're kind of giving your system a chance to breathe. So that's one use case. The other use case is this bufferCount 2.1 or pairwise, where you, for whatever reason, you need to know the previous and current value. And that happens sometimes when you need to calculate, like, the difference between two things or whatever. So, like, if you want to get the velocity of how fast a mouse is moving, you could use bufferCount 2.1 and check, like, the difference between those two things, and you'd need the time too, I suppose, like a timestamp. But yeah, that's the two primary use cases I've seen for bufferCount. So what else? We're going to talk about buffer. Let's just talk about regular buffer. So regular buffer is a bit different. Regular buffer, what it does is it takes any observable right here, a timer, and it just buffers until that observable emits. So that this time it only fired once. Actually, an interval might be more interesting. So I put an interval here, and I'll speed this one up. So this one's emitting multiple, but every single time this interval fires, you see it emits a new buffer, right? So so it's not doing it by count. Now it's just saying, hey, every single time, whatever observable here emits, then I want to emit the buffer. So I could do something like, I could get up here and I could be like, let's use from event, and I could say from event documents click. So now it's running, and every time I click, I get whatever's been built up in the buffer, right? And if I click faster, then the buffer is smaller, but the buffer just builds and builds and builds until an event fires.
Okay, wait. So like buffers, I could imagine. I feel like this kind of basically looks like every time there's an interval, it vomits on you. So, so like I could just imagine like a buffer. I'm just trying to think like, what about for an e-commerce website, for example? When are you using, like you're buffering the first, like maybe if it's like multiple pages, you're buffering the first few pages so that when people click, it's still cached in the memory. Is that kind of would use buffer?
I can't think of a lot of use cases for this for like an e-commerce site. This is really like buffering is really used to do some sort of like,
or like HTTP requests, like buffering those, or
I mean, the primary use case around buffering is I have some expensive thing I want to do with these values, but so I don't want to do it on every single tick. I want to wait and do a bunch of them at once, and then wait and then do a bunch of them at once.
So it might be like you're waiting for all of these values, and then of each value, you need to like go and call like 10 different APIs to get multiple pieces of data or something like that. But you only want to do that every 10 so that it doesn't kill your.
Right. Or here's another one. Let's just say that there's some event in your app like I don't know. Let's say your app is recording mouse movements and then sending it over the wire, right, to some server. You don't want to send a signal over the wire every single mouse event, right? Like, or if you've got like a game or something like that, you want to send like batches of movements over. So you're going to want to buffer them and then send them occasionally instead of like just spamming your server and flooding your connection with a bunch of individual requests. That's the real thing around buffer is like, oh, I'm using this as a way to kind of throttle how many things I'm going to be dealing with, either sending over the wire or processing locally or whatever. It's just a means for kind of limiting like how much work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
So, okay. Do we do bufferTime now?
Well, actually, so I have one interesting pattern with buffer.
Okay.
So an interesting pattern with
well,
buffer.
Actually me.
With what? I'm sorry.
Did you just actually me?
Why are you doing this to me today?
I'm teasing.
All right.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that I cover this. So there's one fun pattern with buffer, and that's if you use there's bufferToggle. What am I trying to say? Throttle. If you use throttle time in particular, then, or let's do debounce time. We have debounce time. So there's every now and then I get asked like, well, what if I want to make sure, like, if I want to wait and start my buffer, if basically I just want to wait for a breather, like, oh, if it's been a while since I've gotten this event, then send the buffer over. So if it's really, really busy, build up a buffer and then wait for there to be kind of a delay and then send it over. So I could do something like that where I could say, okay, so my source is document clicks right now. And what I can do is I could say source pipe debounce time. And I could say, let's wait for half a second. So now what this is going to do is every time I make a click, it's going to buffer it. But if it's been more than half a second since the last click, then it's going to send the buffer here. So I can click, 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 and then wait, and then I get all of the clicks. Or I could click and wait, and I get the click. Right? So it's just a way to kind of, it's basically a way to have like a debounced buffer. So if you're ever in a situation where you're like, okay, this stream is really busy and I want to process these things, but only when I get a breather, this is a fun pattern.
Okay.
So that's regular buffer. Now, the other ones like bufferToggle and bufferWhen are really just kind of plays off of this buffer. They exist, I would say, mostly because of how do I put this? They exist mostly based off of historical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
bufferWhen, I'll just put it on a new line. bufferWhen is, what it does is it gives you this function that gives you the actual value that's come through. I believe, yeah. So it gives you, it'll be like, here's the value from whatever, and you're expected to make it into some other observable.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really matter what that is. At least wait, let's see. Oh, it does not give you the value. It just this fires every single time a buffer is started. And this will dictate when the buffer is closed. And what did I do? I have too many parens. So this is the same sort of thing where it's starting a new buffer every second. Oh wait, no, this one dictates, I got this wrong. This one dictates every single time it started, and the next one that gives you the values from this, so this would be like timer value, you're expected to map into an observable of when you want it to close. I believe. Did I have this wrong? Expected 1 arguments, but got 2. Oh, maybe that's bufferToggle. See, I get them confused. These don't get used very often. I definitely don't use them that often. But yeah, so this is just dictating how long the buffer is going to last, is with bufferWhen. Yeah. So this is it. This is just how long it's going to last. So it starts a buffer right away, and then it calls this to see how long that buffer should last, and then that's it. So this is, you could do the same thing with the other buffer if you wanted, but yeah, it doesn't get used that often. And there's windowed variations of these same things that are all pretty much the same thing, only they emit an observable of values instead of an array of values. They're very, very rarely used in my experience, but the most common 2 patterns that people should know are buffering with this bufferCount 2.1, or like buffer with source pipe debounce time. And this is like debounce buffer. Probably the 2 most useful real world patterns. I can't even think of a lot of real world scenarios for this one, or bufferToggle. bufferToggle is, and like I have to look at some of these. Yeah, so this one's the one I was thinking of. So you've got an observable for when you open a buffer, and then you've got the closing selector that gives you the value from that comes from the openings observable. So I was just getting bufferToggle and bufferWhen like mixed around in my head. But it's I don't know, we can cover it, but it's kind of a weird one. So this one I'll do, let's see, bufferToggle. So we're starting this every, let's do an interval. So every time this interval ticks, we're going to start a new buffer. And then what happens is for closing, this will be like the interval value comes in. So that's going to be a number, or at least it should be. Yep. And then, which instead of like an event, right? And then with that, we could say, oh, I don't know, like just how long it takes until that closes. So it can be interval value times 100 or something. So the first one's going to be 0. Interval. Oh, there we go. First one's going to be 0, and like they're all going to be they're going to get longer and longer. I guess maybe I should do that. So the first one's 0. Next one takes a second. Next one takes 2 seconds, and so on. And it's still collecting everything that if I'm clicking in here. So it starts a new buffer every 1 second, but every single time it takes a little bit longer and longer to emit that value. But yeah, it's a weird one. I can't think of a lot of practical use cases for it. Some part of me believes it exists just because it could be made in .NET, and so now we have it in RxJS. That's the best I can think of. It's probably more useful for like server-side applications where you're trying to filter like huge streams of data down and do things like that, right? But in those cases, back pressure is probably more of a concern, and you might want to use like IXJS instead of RxJS or like async iterators or something. But yeah.
Exciting. Cover all of them.
Yeah, so that's all of them that exist for buffer are bufferToggle, bufferWhen, bufferTime. Oh wait, did we not do bufferTime? We didn't do bufferTime.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and well, I mean, we talked about bufferCount, but you forgot to just say it right now. BufferTime in 2 minutes, Ben. BufferTime in
2 minutes. So bufferTime is pretty much what it sounds like. You give it some sort of time in which you want. If there's only one value, that's when the closings are. So this is going to close every second, and it's just going to buffer things every second, and it will emit empty buffers.
Do you want to hear something really funny?
Yes.
In the first video we ever did together, when you were talking about, well, not the first video we ever did together, but basically when we were talking about all the maps, like switch map and cat map, you were wearing the same shirt.
I was wearing the same shirt in both videos.
Yeah, how do you feel about that?
I don't know. I guess I'm okay with it. It must be my Friday shirt.
It'd be funny if you were wearing the same shirt every single Friday.
Wait, what shirt? Which shirt was it?
It was the Hedy Lamar shirt.
No, there's no way. I've only worn this a couple times. I was wearing this exact same shirt?
Yeah. I'll send you the video so you can be like, wait, what?
That's amazing.
Yeah. All right, hurry up and tell me about BufferTime.
This is BufferTime. I mean, BufferTime, just all it does is it waits a specified amount of time, and then it emits the buffer. So you can, I think there's an alternative way to call it where you can say, why is it doing that? You can say like, I want to open a buffer every second and I want to close it after a half a second. But is that a thing? Maybe not. What is happening? My ID it's dying on me.
Ooh, Dan.
I killed Stack Blitz.
Okay, that was
I did. I killed so much for Stack Blitz. We're gonna stop that one for now.
Screw
I can't even close the tab.
I'm kidding. I love Stack Blitz. All right, say bye to me.
Bye to you.
I'm like a mom.
I can't. But we didn't sing at all today.
Oh, Ben wants to sing.
No, not really.
Were you just starting to sing?
You usually just make me sing.
What were you just starting to sing?
Oh, REO Speedwagon. Is that okay?
Do it. Do it. Come on, Ben.
I can't fight this feeling anymore. I forgot what we were fighting for. I don't know the rest. That's it.
All right.
Wait, I gotta steer the ship into the shore and throw away the oars. I think that's what it is. I think that's the lyrics. I could be wrong.
Until my arms get sore.
Until your arms get sore. It is arm day.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Say
Bye.
bye. Bye.